everyone, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. When I was little, there were two different ways you could hang a candy cane on the Christmas tree. You could just hook it on, or you could dress that candy cane up first in a little felt costume. We had little felt character costumes that we could pull down over top of the candy cane before we hung it on the tree. Well, long story short, I am feeling super nostalgic this year, so I thought there must be a way to make some of those out of crochet. And of course there is! So today we are going to make this adorable little gingerbread man candy cane holder to hang on the tree or to present to someone as an ornament. And we're going to use Lion Brand Heartland for today's ornaments. We'd like to thank Lion Brand Yarn for sponsoring today's video. We're going to put a link to lionbrand.com down below in the description box and the pinned comment, so you can pop over there and check out all of the Heartland colors. I'm using Yosemite. This is the color Yosemite. It's very gingerbready, but I've got another one I'm going to show you on the craft table in a second that you might want to consider for a slightly lighter cookie color. You need a couple of extra little things for this project today, including a couple of candy canes. So you're going to need 2 candy canes per gingerbread man, a couple of little beads or buttons. You can do a little bit of embroidery, you can have some fun with actual rickrack. We're going to talk decorating in a little while. There's lots of options here for decorating your gingerbread man cookie candy cane holders. Also, this doesn't take up very much yarn. You could probably get a dozen or so out of a single skein. So enough said, let's grab our hooks, we'll grab our Heartland yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up some little gingerbread man candy cane holders together. For our gingerbread man candy cane holders, I'm using Heartland by Lion Brand. I'm using the Yosemite color. You can see I've already gotten into it here. This is the Yosemite. It's a really nice gingerbready color. But if you wanted a slightly lighter cookie, you might want to consider Great Sand Dunes. This is a really lovely size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. It's nice and soft. And there's about 251 yards in each skein, so you should have no trouble getting at least a dozen of these little gentlemen out of a single ball of Heartland. I've also added some surfaced chaining stitch along the bottom of the front of him here, just as a little bit of a decoration, like cookie decoration. You could also use rickrack or ribbon. You could just stitch it on if you wanted to, like a little bit of embroidery, or you could leave it off altogether. It's entirely up to you, but just so you know, I used 24/7 cotton for that because I really like the mercerized thread of this particular cotton yarn, and I feel like it offered a nice contrast between the yarns, so that gave me more of a kind of a, it stands out a little bit more than say another acrylic would. So that was my choice there, but that's entirely up to you. I also used a little bit for his mouth. You're going to need beads or buttons. I used 4 little white beads. These are 5mm sized beads. They're plastic. They just come in a container of multicolored beads. I think you can get them at Walmart or other craft stores, but you could use buttons. You could also do more embroidery here if you wanted to. You could use French knots, for example. You're obviously going to want a couple of candy canes, 2 per gingerbread man, and a little bit of ribbon or thread or cord or something like this just to hang them with. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. I'm using a 4.5mm hook, also known as a 7 for this. And if you're using beads or buttons, you're going to want a needle and thread to sew them on. And if you're going to use a little bit of ribbon to hang them with, I recommend about 12 to 13 inches. That's 30 to 32.5 centimeters per length. Once you have all that, plus your 2 candy canes, we can get started. Each gingerbread man requires 2 pieces, a front and a back. So you're going to make 2 absolutely identical. The only difference is that on the first one you make, you're going to cut a short tail when you fasten off and weave it in, and on the second one you're going to leave a long tail for sewing because there's a little bit of stitching around the outside edge of our gingerbread man that gives us the, sort of puts it all together. We leave a couple spaces in the shoulder area for the arm part of the candy cane, and the whole bottom is left open. So there's not a lot of sewing, but that's the only difference between these 2 pieces. So we're going to make 2 identical. We're going to take our gingerbread colored yarn, Yosemite in this case. We're going to start with a cinch circle. So just make a loop around your fingers Place your hook through the loop, grab the yarn, pull up a loop on your hook, and then chain 1. And we're going to work 8 single crochet into this circle, working over top of that short tail so we can cinch it up when we're done. Once you have 8 single crochet worked into that cinch circle, you're going to take that short tail, cinch it up nice and tight, and we're not joining the row with a single crochet. We're going to work directly into what was the first stitch of row 1 to begin row 2. So rows 1, 2, and 3, there's no joining in between. I'm going to work over top of my short tail, but you could always leave it to the back and weave it in later if you want to. We're going to continue increasing. We're going to go from a stitch count of 8 up to a stitch count of 16 by working 2 single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So again, you don't join row 1 to row 2. You just start single crocheting into the first stitch of row 1 to begin row 2. 2 single crochet in each stitch all the way around. If you have trouble keeping track of where you are, you might find it helpful to mark the first stitch of the row, so either use a little stitch marker or just stick your yarn needle in there, and that will just help keep track of where you are, so you're not really having to spend as much time counting. You can just worry about working 2 single crochet into each stitch. I've come back around to the beginning. There's my marked stitch there. I just sort of stuck my yarn needle in it. I have 16 stitches. I'm going to continue to increase now for one more row. So I'm going to take my little yarn needle out. Into the next stitch, which was the first stitch of row 2, I'm going to work 2 single crochet. So still no joining of rows with a slip stitch. We're just working directly into the next stitch. And then single crochet once into the stitch after that. So your little increase pattern is 2 single crochet into the first stitch, and I'm just going to mark that first stitch again with my needle, and then 1 single crochet into the stitch after that. So 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around, and we're going to go from a total of 16 stitches in row 2 up to 24 stitches at the end of row 3. At the end of row 3, you'll be up to 24 single crochet all the way around. And now we're just going to even up our circle. So we're going to single crochet once into each of the next 3 stitches. This doesn't change your stitch count, so we're not increasing, but we are just evening up the circle shape. So this is the little head of our gingerbread man. Now we can finish off by slip stitching into the next stitch, and that completes row 3. So row 1, row 2, row 3. We're not cutting our yarn. We are continuing now with the body of our little gingerbread man. We're going to chain 1 and half double crochet in the same place that we slip stitched. So half double crochet. You're going to single crochet now in each of the next 2 stitches, and half double crochet in the next stitch. So row 4 consists of chain 1, half double crochet in the same place, the same stitch that you slip stitched into, single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, half double crochet into the next stitch. So row 4 only has 4 stitches in it. Chain 1 now and turn with every row hereafter. So we're building the body of our little gingerbread man. Row 5 begins with 2 half double crochet in the first stitch. So 2 half double crochet in the first stitch, half double crochet once into each of the next 2 stitches, and 2 half double crochet in the last stitch. And you'll be up to 6 stitches at the end of row 5. Remember, when you're working back and forth with half double crochet, sometimes the last stitch of the row might be pulled down the edge a little bit, so make sure you don't miss it when you're working back and forth. If you have trouble missing that stitch, just mark it with a stitch marker or count. It's helpful to count. It's also helpful to use a stitch marker. For row 6, we're going to chain 1 and turn. Row 6, we begin with 2 half double crochet in the first stitch, half double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. And into the last stitch, which wants to curve down the side a little bit, so don't miss it, you're going to work 2 half double crochet. So you're increasing on either end. So that was row 6. We're up to 8 stitches all the way across now. We have one more row of increasing. That's row 7. We're going to chain 1 and turn. Same thing, we're going to half double crochet twice into the first stitch of the row. Half double crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. And then 2 half double crochet into that last stitch, which is just tugged down the side a little bit. So don't miss it. 2 half double crochet into the last stitch. That brings us up to a stitch count of 10 all the way across at the end of row 7. For rows 8, 9, and 10, you are not increasing. You are just going to chain 1, turn, and half double crochet in each stitch all the way across. So you will continue to have 10 stitches in each row for rows 8, 9, and 10. Chain 1, turn, half double crochet in each stitch. And I'll see you at the end of row 10. At the end of row 10, you'll still have 10 stitches all the way across, and this is my second row, or I should say my second side. If you're just doing side 1, at the end of row 10, you're going to fasten off, leave a short tail, and just weave it in at the back. For side 2, I should say, once you've finished row 10, you're going to fasten off, but you're going to leave yourself a 60 centimeter, maybe 24-inch tail for sewing. So cut a long tail on side 2, a short tail on side 1, fasten off, weave in your tails, your short tails for side 1. If you have a short tail left on side 2 back here, weave it in. Otherwise, leave that long tail out on side 2. Make sure you've got 2 pieces that are identical. One of them will have a long sewing tail. Before we do any joining of side 1 to side 2, let's decorate side 1. Now you're more than welcome to continue to decorate on the back, but I've just decorated the front. In particular, I'm going to show you how to do some surface chaining to kind of give this a little bit of a rick-rack look. I'm going to show you how to put on a very simple smiley face and then sew on some buttons for some details. So let's start with the rick-rack down at the bottom. I'm going to use my side 1 as my front. And I leave this up to you to decide which side you like best, but this is the side I like. This is the front facing side for me. So I'm going to take my white yarn now and I'm going to make a slip knot, but I'm not going to leave it on my hook. I'm going to take it back off my hook. I'm going to pick up my side 1 piece so that the right side is facing me. I'm going to take my hook and all the way down here at the top of row 10. So this is row 10, this is the top of row 10, this is the bottom of row 10. I'm going to put my hook in the top edge of that row, and I mean it if I'm looking at it upright. So I'm looking at my little gingerbread man upright. Technically, this is the top of row 10, but if I'm looking at it this way, this is the top of row 10. But basically you want to be up between row 10 and row 9. So I'm going to slip my hook through the top there of that stitch, right close to the edge. Then I'm going to grab my slip knot and just pull it gently back out through. So I want to make sure that the knot and the little tail stay on the wrong side. And now I'm going to insert my hook just sort of not straight down but over one. So if I was going to go straight down, it would be this way, but I'm going to skip over to the next stitch. And I'm going to, not tightly, grab the yarn from behind and chain. But the surface chains stay on the right side and the crochet work stays on the back. I'm going to hop over to the next stitch right at the very edge, bottom edge here of the gingerbread man. and surface chain again. And then I'm going to hop back up, kind of going to the next stitch but up to the top. I'm working in a zigzag fashion, and that's how I'm going to get this little zigzag. So up top I'm going to go over one and surface chain, and then I'm going to go straight down and over one. So I'm going down on an angle, and again I'm not crocheting tightly. I'm going to go next door, and then I'm going to come back up but over one. I'm always kind of going over one stitch, and then over up here, and then down but over one down here. Next door to that one, still at the bottom edge, and then back up but over one, and that puts me right at the edge over here. So now I've got this really cute little zigzaggy line going, and you can sort of fiddle around with the stitches later to kind of even them out if you feel that they're a bit uneven, but you'll have a fairly neat bit of crochet kind of work at the back, but no one's going to see the back, so don't worry about that, because that's the inside edge of our gingerbread man. I'm going to pull up on my loop. I'm going to insert my hook now from the wrong side, grab that loop, tighten it a little bit, and just pull it down to the inside or the wrong side. I'm going to chain one on this side, and then I'm going to fasten off. Don't need a lot of yarn, just enough to fasten off. And then I like to just make a little knot with that yarn, just so I know that it's not going to go anywhere. So just knotting around like another neighboring piece of yarn. And then if you want, you can weave these tails in, or just sort of just lightly across the back of those stitches, and then trim any excess. You don't want this showing through to the other side, so make sure when you do a little weaving in, double check. You shouldn't see it, because if anything it'll be underneath that zigzagging stitch. And I'm just going to trim anything that is sort of sticking out the other side. And careful not to snip your actual crochet. There we go. There. A little bit of crochet surface chaining kind of simulates a bit of rickrack. Next, let's sew on a little simple mouth. So this doesn't take up very much yarn. I'm just going to cut myself, oh golly, maybe 15 centimeters, about 6 inches of white yarn. I'm going to thread it up in my yarn needle, and I kind of like the idea of going along the edge, the bottom edge of what was row 2. So you see row 1 is this little bump here. This is row 2's bump, and I'm going to put my smile right through this little divot between the rows 2 and 3 of the head. So I'm just going to pull my yarn in from behind, leaving out a little tail, and I'm going to go up the curve. I don't mind if my smiley face is a little bit crooked. This guy is sort of smiling to one side. I think that's kind of cute. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of slack so that it wants to lie in between the bumps of row 2 and row 3. Then I'm going to bring my needle out, so I'm going to just right down where the middle of my smile would be. I'm going to see there's a little space between stitches. I'm going to bring my needle up there, first on the top side of the string, and then I'm going to make sure I don't pull this too tight. I'm going to go back down over top of the smile through the same little space, And then I can sort of tug on string number 1, tug on string number 2 to make that nice and small so you can't really see it. And now I've positioned and sort of stay stitched a little smile. Really simple, just knot the two ends together back here. I like to do it at least twice. And you can weave in or trim any excess, and since it's up under the head, you really don't need to worry about weaving tails in. You can do this, make it nice and tight, trying to make sure that you don't pull your smile out of alignment. I'm just going to trim those two little ends, and that's that. Easy peasy. And that's the smile put in. And now we just need to add a couple of little bead eyes and a couple of little buttons down his front. I have all 4 of my buttons here, and I just sort of, or I should say my beads, I've got them all sitting inside the eye of my scissors so they don't want to roll away on me. And it's pretty easy to decide where you want your eyes. Just sort of look at where you've put your mouth and go up to about the middle of the face. I've put them on either side of the row 1 bump, and you can see that there. Easy peasy. Take your yarn, or I should say your needle and thread, double up your thread, knot the two ends together at the back or the bottom. I'm going to start on the wrong side of my gingerbread man, and I'm just going to slip my needle underneath the loop back here and bring my needle through that thread to just sort of create a little looped knot. Then I'm going to bring it out through the space where I want to start one of my eyes. And sewing down beads is pretty easy. You just want to make sure that you don't have any bunching up of thread on the front or the back. You want to lie your eye down so that it kind of lies where you want it to, and you take your needle and place it back through your fabric about the same width away from where you brought it out as the width of your bead. So my bead's about 5 millimeters. And then you want to make sure it doesn't twist on you. And then you're going to just sew back and forth through the fabric, going through your bead a few times. I recommend 3, maybe 4 times, depending on how strong you feel your sewing thread is. And you don't need to pull too tightly. I'm going to say 3 feels good to me. Alright, that's the front, that's the back. Then I'm going to just bring my needle over to the other side where I want the other eye to sit, and I'm going to repeat the process over here. Once you have bead number 2 sewn on, just flip your piece over and make a knot on the back. You can knot your thread off any way you feel comfortable. I like to just sort of run it underneath some thread stitches or even a little bit of yarn and just create a little knot at least twice, and then I can snip that thread. And then I'm going to knot my two ends again with my thread, and I'm going to repeat the process for his front buttons. And I placed mine in the middle of, this would have been row 6 and row 8, so right in the middle of those 2 rows. But you can use 2, 3, however many buttons you want, and you can place them anywhere you like. I'm going to do the same thing, middle of this row and the middle of this row. And it's the same procedure. You just knot your yarn, or your thread I should say, onto the back of your gingerbread man. Bring your needle out through the front where you want your bead. Sew it 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 if it's sort of not great thread or you're a little worried about your stitching. And then repeat for the second one. Knot on the back, trim any excess, and that's it for sewing on the buttons. Once you're done with all that sewing, knot off, make sure that they all feel nice and stable. They're not going to come off on you. And put that needle back in a safe place. You don't want to accidentally poke yourself with it later. All right, that's all the decoration required for the front of our gingerbread man. If you wanted to do something else, like add a little rickrack or something to the back, I would recommend you do that now. But once you're finished, it's time to join them together. So you're going to grab your yarn needle and you're going to thread up that long tail you left on side 2. We're going to take our 2 pieces, side 1 and side 2, making sure that the right sides are facing up, and you're going to put them wrong sides together. So if you look at the back, you see the nice side. If you look at the front, you see the nice side. Now what we're going to do is do a running stitch. So a running stitch is basically, it's like a running stitch. The stitch continues to go in one direction. You go up through the fabric, across, down, cross, up, across, down. So you're not wrapping around the outside. This is not a whip stitch. This is just a running stitch. And what we're going to do is just work our way through the very edge of our gingerbread man fabric, all the way up to the about row 5. So basically the shoulder area. So you're going to come up, and then a little ways away, come back down again. And then a little bit to the side, making sure you're going through both pieces of fabric and keeping them aligned. You want to make sure that everything kind of lines up. And then a little ways over, still making sure that I'm getting both pieces of fabric, and I'm trying to keep my stitches as close to the edge as possible, and you can see that they completely disappear. You're not going to see them. So there's no point in doing any kind of fancy stitching. You don't need to do the whip stitch. We're just doing a straight running stitch all the way around the outside edge of our little gingerbread man. When you get to about the shoulder, this would be row 5. It's that first full row of half double crochet under his chin. Bring your yarn through to the inside and then skip up to about the first stitch at the bottom of his face, still on the same side, so the front or the back, wherever you are. So you're skipping a space, and then you're going to continue with that running stitch. So now you're going to kind of get those head pieces together, make sure they're nice and aligned. And you're going to continue the running stitch, working through the pairs of stitches around the head. And what you've done is you've left a little space here in the shoulder area. So I can make that a little tighter. Doesn't have to be too big, obviously. It's just a candy cane that's going to go through it. And then you continue to work a running stitch. Now it's a little easier because you actually have actual stitches that you can kind of run your needle through. And I like to do all of them, each matched set all the way around the head. And again, you're not going to see any of the stitching, but it does give it a little bit of a kind of like a bit of a cookie shape. You can just work away at making sure you get through each pair of stitches all the way around, and I'll catch up with you at the other shoulder. When you get back around to the other shoulder, it doesn't matter whether you're on the front or the back, you're just going to bring your needle to the inside and sort of skip that shoulder row and just bring it back out a little bit further down. And then continue. You're continuing that running stitch through both pieces of fabric. You're just skipping a little space so that you've got enough room that you can stick a candy cane through it. And then we're going to continue that running stitch down the other side of our gingerbread body, remembering to try and make sure you're getting as close to the edge as you can, and you're making sure that you're getting both pieces of fabric. So side 1 and side 2. And I feel like I've got probably one more stitch left down here at the very bottom corner. go. And I might just do that twice. There we go. So your bottom is going to be open, and you should have two little shoulder spaces, and they don't have to be absolutely equal in size, but they should both be on either side of his neck and about big enough that you can stick your little finger through it. Then you're going to bring your yarn to the inside of your gingerbread man. I'm just going to make a little knot, so I like to run my needle underneath a loop there. And just make a little knot. Nothing fancy. And then I'm going to weave that tail in back and forth underneath those stitches, just like I would if I just fastened off crochet. So back and forth a few times, just to make sure that that yarn isn't going to go anywhere. And then if there's anything left over, I'll just trim the excess. It's better to have too long a sewing thread than too short a sewing thread, because even though you can tie in some extra yarn if you need to, if you sort of run out, it's just, you know, a bit cumbersome. It slows you down. And you can always just tuck that little leftover tail, if you've got some left over that you need to trim, like I do. You can just throw it into your little stash of little tiny ends and use it for stuffing down the road for a little amigurumi or something. There we go. So that is our little gingerbread man all sewn up. All that's left to do now is to add his candy canes. So number one, I like to go from the bottom. I insert the bottom of the cane through the shoulder and then out the bottom. And candy cane number two on that side, through the other shoulder and out the bottom. They're just so darn cute. They look like they're all ready to start running away. So those are our candy canes in. Now if you want to add a hanger, which I do because I love to hang these on the tree, you're going to take your ribbon, knot the two ends together. So I've got both my ends, and I'm making a loop and passing both of them through. I'm going to make sure that knot stays as close to the end as possible. And then I'm going to make sure that it's nice and tight. There we go. I'm going to take my yarn needle and I'm going to just poke it through the top loop, or at the top stitch, the very top of this little guy's head. I'm going to take the folded part of my ribbon and just feed it through. And then I'm taking the knotted end, passing it through that loop of ribbon and pulling tight. And I've just looped my little hanger on. And there we go. Two little gingerbread men candy cane holders, all ready for the tree. I hope they don't run away with my candy canes. These guys are so cute. I am definitely going to be making more. I think this is going to be one of those, like, everybody gets one of these this year gifts. I just love them, and they've got that sort of nostalgic feel. I feel like I'll be hanging these on the tree and I will be 5 years old again. I absolutely love it. We hope you enjoyed making these little gingerbread candy cane holders along with us this week. And thank you again to Lion Brand Yarns for sponsoring today's video. We will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty. I mean, honestly, have a great week, and we will see you soon. Bye, guys.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.